Hello, and welcome back to this week's episode of 7 Minutes of Sport. As always, I'm Christina, your host throughout this podcast. And today I am slightly torn with emotion, as on the one hand, this is very sadly our final episode in season 1. But on the other hand, I am extremely excited by the highly esteemed guest who has joined me today. This guest is the current General Counsel at World Athletics. She has the most impressive legal background, as she was the Legal and Governance Director at the RFU for 12 years. She's done the interim head of legal at the Lawn Tennis Association and has been partner and head of sports group at Farrer & Co. She currently sits on the board of British Rowing as a non-executive director. And one of the many committees she sits on as part of that is the Safeguarding Committee. So as you can tell, I am absolutely thrilled to introduce you to Karena Vleck. Karena, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
No, thank you for coming. So just so the listeners are aware, I'm going to be asking Karena questions relating to the World Athletics Safeguarding Policy, which was launched, if I'm right, on the 10th of November 2021. And just some admin points for those who may not have joined us before. In this podcast, we run an interview, which is 7 minutes in length, hence the name 7 Minutes of Sport. And I do have a timer with me to make sure we stick to those 7 minutes. So the only question left, I guess, is Karena, are you ready for me to start the timer?
Born ready.
Excellent. All right. In that case, the timer started. So first of all, the name World Athletics seems very wide in scope. Just so the listeners know, who does the safeguarding policy encompass?
So as World Athletics, we are the international federation responsible for track and field athletics and running, etc., all over the world. So our safeguarding policy applies to us as an entity, as the International Federation. It applies to our area associations, and we have 6 of them. And it also applies to our 214 member federations across the world. All of those, the World Athletics, the area associations, and the member federations have obligations and responsibilities under the policy. But ultimately, we would like the policy to apply to everybody in athletics.
And just focusing in on that policy now, what would you say are the main principles that the safeguarding policy is founded upon?
We want to make sure that everybody involved in athletics are protected from any kind of abuse, harassment, or exploitation. And sometimes when people think about safeguarding, they think about child protection and policies that are about children. So our safeguarding policy is about protecting everybody, whether you're an adult, whether you're a child, whether you're a participant, whether you're an official, whether you're a referee, however you're involved in athletics, we want to make sure that you are protected. And I think that is the sort of the more novel way of looking at it, because just because you've turned 18 2 days ago doesn't make you any less vulnerable potentially than when you were 2 days before the age of 18. And also our policy talks about exploitation and in athletics, you know, given how diverse we are and from so many things, we really wanted to make sure that we covered that and not just what people might traditionally think of safeguarding as child protection and perhaps, you know, just sexual matters.
Oh, certainly. And there will be some organisations who will be looking at implementing their own safeguarding policy and perhaps looking to you as an example. So after this policy was drafted, how did you make sure that member federations and area associations implemented it?
We wanted to make sure that every member federation and area association had a safeguarding policy and procedure in place by the end of this year. And in order to do that, we wanted to give a whole set of templates so that they could use them. But what we found, as I mentioned, we've got 214 member federations, for example. They are all in completely different places in terms of their safeguarding journeys. Some are highly sophisticated and have they're where they're situated in the country, they're regulated by something like Safe Sport in the USA. Others have never even heard of safeguarding and not even sure what it means. So we have a massive range of scope. So we designed a starter pack for those that had nothing, and then a more sophisticated guide for those that did have something in place. And then what we're doing is we are tracking how they're getting on using the annual returns that our member federations have to file each year to see how they're getting on with their policies and procedures. And interestingly, as they're discovering and learning more about what safeguarding means, I think some of them are thinking, actually, maybe we haven't got what we need to have in place. So it's a very much an ongoing exercise, and I'm not underestimating the task ahead.
And that actually leads very perfectly into my next question, which is, how would you describe the impact that this policy has had since its release and implementation?
Oh, I've been really overwhelmed by just how much our member federations have embraced the need to really do something in this area. I think a lot of our member federations were not sure. They felt they should be doing something, but they didn't really know where to start. And I think what the policy has done is raised the topic as an issue, and it's made them realize that this is something they absolutely need to do. So but before, we didn't really even talk about safeguarding very much in the work that we're doing, and now it's becoming a central part. I went to the Oceania, which is our area association covering Australia, New Zealand, and a lot of the islands. They had said that no one was allowed to come to their convention and congress unless they'd done a safeguarding course, which was fantastic. I think that we had a face-to-face training session for our member federations in Budapest, and the feedback that has come back is we really want more information on safeguarding in particular. We need to know more about it, and we need to do something on it. So it's had a massive impact in terms of raising the profile of safeguarding amongst our member federations and our area associations. And what we did in Budapest as well is start to raise the profile of safeguarding amongst our athletes too.
That again leads perfectly into my next question, focusing more on the education aspect. Obviously, there has been a great deal of emphasis on education within this policy. Who would you say is that education mainly aimed at?
Well, it's such an interesting question, because everybody needs to be educated on safeguarding, but everybody will absorb that education in a different way. They'll have a different preference. Somebody who is age 10 might have a different preference to someone who is in their 50s, for example, as to how they want to learn. What we've designed is a safeguarding essentials course that is open to everybody in athletics. It's a 90-minute course. We were kindly allowed to repurpose the FIFA Guardians course to make it athletics specific, and that is available for everybody. It's a very much an entry-level basic guide, and now we're working with the Open University and UNICEF and other sports to create more sophisticated courses for those who are the safeguarding leads. That is for everybody. We're also need to really work out how we get athletes to understand what safeguarding is and to say something, because a lot of safeguarding concerns arise from just opportunities, or somebody may start something as a low-level concern. If someone who is the subject of that concern is able to put their hand up at very early stages and understand that what's being proposed is not acceptable, that will hopefully stop those low-level concerns becoming more serious and then into real, horrible sort of safeguarding matters. So our trick now is or our real challenge is to work out how we best get the message to athletes, and that is difficult. I can't see every athlete wanting to download a 90-minute safeguarding course, so we might have to use TikTok and other ways of really getting messages to athletes. But that's our challenge, and that's our responsibility for the next few months, is to really work out how we can get athletes to be educated in this area.
And on that note, that is the 7-minute timer. So that draws our discussion to a close. That went by very quickly for me. I found that incredibly interesting and informative. Is there anything else you'd like to say just before we wrap up this episode?
Oh, I think it was for me that the real challenge of moving from a UK situation to moving somewhere like World Athletics is seeing just the difference between our member federations in terms of where they all are on their safeguarding journeys, and also understanding that it's very easy potentially to put a sort of a European, a sort of European, sort of perhaps North American perspective on issues when issues are completely different in different parts of the world, and people's concerns and how society perceives matters is entirely different. So it's been a massive challenge and hugely interesting trying to work out how we can set a safeguarding standard for the whole sport that works in those enormously divergent parts of the world.
Absolutely. And I know I could very easily sit here and listen to 70 minutes of this, let alone 7 minutes of this. So it must have been incredibly interesting making that move from a national to a world body. Karena, thank you so much for joining me today on the podcast. I really appreciate it, as I know all of our listeners will have done as well. For all of those listening who may want to know a little bit more detail about World Athletics and the safeguarding policy, by all means go onto their website. They do have some fabulous booklets uploaded onto there, which I have had a look at myself, and you can find some more information there, so go and have a read. But on that note, that is all we have time for today. Thank you very much to Karena once again for joining us. And thank you to all the listeners who have tuned in, not just for this episode, but throughout the season. That does bring 7 minutes of sport to an end of season 1. It has been an absolute pleasure bringing you these episodes. And if you watch this space, there may even be a season 2. But for now, we'll say our goodbyes. So we'll see you soon.